Adding and subtracting decimals is very easy. You just line up the decimal point. When you multiply decimals, you multiply first, then count the number of decimal places. Now, it's a little more complicated to divide decimals, but notice that we set them up just like whole numbers. That's the easy thing about decimals, is they act just like whole numbers, except you have to be aware of the decimal places. Now, here's the rule. You cannot divide by a decimal. You have to turn it into a whole number. You have to divide by a whole number. So what we're going to do is get rid of the decimal by moving the decimal point all the way to the right. Remember, numbers without decimal points are called what? Whole numbers. So if I have the number 15, where would the decimal go? Right here. Remember, if you can't find it, you put it behind it. Now, 0.25 is a decimal, so I'm going to turn it into a whole number by moving the decimal all the way to the right. 2 steps. Now, remember our principles in math. Whatever you do to the top number of a fraction, you do to the bottom number of a fraction. Whatever you do to the right hand, you do to the left hand. It's a principle of balance in our mathematics. It just reflects the laws of the universe. Now, where's the decimal on 150? Did you say right here because it's a whole number? Now, what did I do to the left side? I moved the decimal twice. So that's what I'm going to do to the right side. I'm going to move the decimal twice. Whoosh, whoosh, and put the decimal here. That's the sound of a decimal moving. Whoosh, whoosh. Now I put zeros in to fill the empty places. Now I'm going to treat it the same as in whole numbers. I'm going to stay in my columns. If I asked you at the beginning how many quarters are in $1.50, how many quarters are in $1.50? Do you know? How many?
In $1.50, there would be 6 quarters.
Very good. In $1.50, there are 6 quarters. So what I'm going to do is stay in my columns and tell the truth. Does 25 go into 1? No. Does it go into 15? No. Does it go into 150? Yes. It's very important to get in the right column. It goes 6 times. We know 6 quarters is $1.50. Now I bring down the next 0, and I have to answer over each column. So what's 150 divided by 25 cents? 600 quarters. Look at this similar problem. Once again, I cannot have a decimal on the left side. You cannot divide by a decimal. You turn it into a whole number. So I'm going to move over 3 times here. Whoosh, 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 and put my decimal there. Now, what kind of number is 15? I don't see a decimal, so it must be a whole number. So I'm going to put the decimal behind it and move it 3 places. 1, 2, 3. And put up my decimal. Now each jump has to be filled with a 0. You always have to stay in your columns. Now, does 25 go into 1? No. Does it go into 15? No. Does it go into 150? Yes. 6 times. So I'm going to claim that column. Once you claim a column, then every column gets an answer. 6 times 25 is 150. Now I'm just going to bring down these zeros and answer for them. So notice we have the same answer for both problems. Now what about when we're dealing with whole numbers? I don't have a decimal here. I don't have a decimal here, so I'm dividing whole numbers. Does 25 go into 15? No, it's too big. You can't fit 25 cars in 15 parking spaces. That's what you're trying to do when you divide. You can't put the larger number into the smaller without moving the decimal. But 25 does go into 150. Just always tell the truth. How many quarters did we say are in $1.50?
6.
6. Bring down the 0. Bring down the 0. Look at this example. I have a tiny little decimal here. That's 25 what? Tenths, hundreds, thousands, 10,000ths. Think out of $10,000 on the table, if you got 25, would that be a big part of it or a small part?
Small.
Small part, that's a small decimal. So I'm going to move this decimal in 4 times. Remember, whatever you do to the left hand, you do to the right hand in math. Whatever you do to the top number of a fraction, you do to the bottom number. Whatever you do to this side of an equation, you do to this side. Just 25 go into 1?
Nope.
No. But I moved this decimal 4 places. So what am I going to do with this decimal point? Move it 4 places. 1, 2, 3, 4. And every one of those places is going to have to be filled with a 0. Now I bring up my decimal point. Once you have your decimal point established on top of the problem, then just stay in your columns and forget about the decimal. You've already got it in the right place, then you just do your division like whole numbers. Does 25 go into 1? No. Does it go into 15? No. You can't fit 25 cars in 15 parking spaces. You can't put 25 cats in 15 baskets. But 25 does go into 150 6 times. And notice from this point, all the problems are the same. So the only difference between dividing decimals and dividing whole numbers is you move the decimal point first, and then you forget about it and stay in your columns. It's no harder than dividing whole numbers, except you have to stay in your columns. Now what about here? What kind of number is 25? Is it a whole number or a part number?
Oh.
It's a whole number because it doesn't have a decimal. Remember, when you can't find it, you put it behind it. So I didn't move this decimal. Remember our principle, whatever we do to the right hand, we do to the left hand. Since I didn't move the decimal here, I'm not going to move it here. I'm going to run it straight up the flagpole. Then I'm just going to tell the truth. Now, does 25 go into 1? Does it go into 15?
No.
No. Does it go into 150?
Yes.
Yeah. But what am I going to put over the 5? I got to tell the truth. 25 won't go in, so I got to put a 0 there. Now 25 will go into 150 6 times. Are you starting to catch it? Now here, I have a whole number too with a decimal. What am I going to do? I'm going to move that decimal point over once. Remember, whatever I do to the right hand, I do to the left hand. Where's the decimal here? There isn't a decimal. What kind of numbers don't have decimals?
Whole.
Whole numbers. What's our rhyme? If you can't find it, put it behind it. So the decimal goes here. Now remember, whatever you do to the right hand, you do to the left hand. Since you move this decimal over once, you're going to move this decimal over once, immediately put up the decimal, fill the place with a 0. Does 25 go into 150? Yes. It won't go into 1, it won't go into 15, but it'll go into 156 times. So you see, all the problems almost ended up with the same mathematics, except for we had to respect the decimal in each case. Remember, always think in terms of columns, and always remember, whatever you do to the top number, you do to the bottom number. Whatever you do to the right hand, you do to the left hand. It's the principle of balance. Pay attention to your decimals. Make sure that you move your decimal all the way over, and you'll have it. Now I'm going to do some slightly more complicated problems, but I hope you've got the idea on where the decimal goes. So again, the rule when you're dividing decimals is the divisor cannot have a decimal. What does that mean? It means we move it all the way to the wall, up against the wall. Move it over 3 times here. Now, Whatever I do to the right hand, I do to the left hand. But here's the mistake folks will make. Here's how we'll catch you on a test. You'll put the decimal here and count 3 places. I see it all the time. But that's not where the decimal goes. This isn't 72 cents, it's $72. It's not the price of a candy bar, it's the price of a jacket or a pair of shoes. So where's the decimal? Here. Now what am I going to do with the decimal point? I'm going to move it 3 places. 1, 2, 3. Why? Because whatever I do to the right hand, I do to the left hand. I fill my empty places with zeros. Put up the decimal right away. Now, does 36 go into 7? No. Does it go into 72? Yeah. I know that 35 plus 35 is 70. So 36 plus 36 is going to end in a 2. So 36 goes into 72 2 times. Now I multiply, just like in whole numbers. Subtract it. Bring down the 0. Does 36 go into 0? No. Bring down the 0. Bring down the 0. Remember, don't stop until you get to the last decimal place, because on these kinds of problems, that's a mistake most people are going to make. Once again, the mistake we'll see here is we moved this decimal 3 places. Where's the decimal on the right side? It's behind the whole number. People will start from here, and it's going to put their answer by a factor of 100 times.